Project Veritas, James O'Keefe. Well, let me start here by saying, holy hot damn, they've raised $4.8 million in 2016 alone. Hello. 2016 alone. That is out of control. I mean, if you follow Project Veritas any amount of time, you know how much how ridiculous their operation is, and you know how utterly propagandistic they are, despite them trying to cast themselves as being legitimate journalists. They're a joke. James O'Keefe is the guy who dressed up like a pimp in order to go and to bring down Acorn. He likes to make, since he likes to be sensationalized. That's all he really has to offer. He tries to do stings, and I would say 99% of his stings require that he highly edit videos in order to make them say something that they don't say. Right. But and I bring that up. And James O'Keefe is a convicted felon. Right. He's got several major, actually no one. I don't want to put more crimes on him than he actually has. But this is James O'Keefe. And he has raised in 2016, I haven't even gotten to the article by the Washington Post, because the thing that stood out the most to me in the Washington Post article was $4.8 million. $4.8 million in 2016 alone. And 10,000 of which came from Donald Trump, the Donald Trump charity. So one thing that makes Project Veritas easy to donate to is that they're a 501c3. They are a nonprofit organization that people who donate to are able to write it off on their taxes. So, that always makes it easier. It's like a church, essentially. I want to fix something here. It's like a church, and they're able to write, people who make donations are able to write it off on their taxes. So, that makes some of it. But I think the other part of it is that conservatives really love what they do. Conservatives really love what Project Veritas does. In the journalism world, not that it really matters to conservatives, because anything that doesn't parrot a conservative talking point is fake news to them. But in the real world of journalism, Project Veritas is a laughing stock. They are considered a joke, and they're only covered because one, either they directly involve themselves in the inner workings of a news organization like the Washington Post article today, or because they do something so ridiculous that it almost warrants them being covered. All right, that's the preface. Here's what happened today, and I think it's a very I think it's perfect. So it turns out Project Veritas was trying to do a sting on Washington Post, and particularly in the area of Roy Moore. They wanted, and actually not wanted, but they did. They hired a woman who went to the Washington Post initially via an email saying that she had information, et cetera, about Roy Moore and the relationship that she had with Roy Moore. She began talking via email. Eventually, they had a phone call, and eventually they met up. And the sole purpose, if you read the article, the sole purpose was to get the reporter from Washington Post, one of the two original reporters who broke the news of Roy Moore having relationships with girls as young as 14. They wanted to get one of those two reporters to say that there was a political agenda. Essentially, she kept trying. Jamie Phillips is the name of the actress from Project Veritas. She kept trying to get the reporter to say, oh, the purpose of this, or the result of this, or the goal of this reporting is to take down Roy Moore. And one thing that came out of this is the journalistic integrity, at least in this case, of the Washington Post. And, what they did was they showed that they have enough procedures in place, enough proper procedures, journalistic procedures, journalism 101, basically. Research before you publish. Research before you, not long before you publish, research before you even continue investigating. They did some basic research. And I'm not really sure that so is it even necessary? Should I, guys, I'm fixing something. Sorry to everyone on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, seeing my computer moving around. But I have to fix something because it's driving me crazy. I'm not sure if I even should really offer this critique. But a lot of people are acting as though the Washington Post did something so amazing. And I'm not saying this to slam the Washington Post, but what they did was journalism, actual journalism and research and follow through and not just get something and run with it. And I think in an age of media being as quick as you possibly can, and in all intents and purposes, this is pretty quick. I think the entire story with Roy Moore and the young girls broke on November 9th, which was the day of the initial contact, which I give Project Veritas credit. I mean, they moved like boom, they moved quick. The same day they moved to try to set up this thing, but they met on November 22nd last week. So this turnaround, this entire fiasco has been less than a month, which to me is a relatively quick turnaround when you're talking about potentially a nationwide major breaking news. But what happens in this political and this media world that we're in, people try to break news as quickly as possible, and they set themselves up for failure. Case in point, everybody remembers the fiasco with Rachel Maddow and how she got so excited because David K. Johnston gave her a copy of Donald Trump's, I believe, 2005 tax return, and she went out there and said, we've got the tax returns. And it turned out to be much ado about nothing and really was shining a negative light on her work over there at the Rachel Maddow show. That's the world that we live in. Clickbait, fast as you can. First one there wins. And so while everyone is championing the Washington Post today, I really would just say this is just pretty much basic journalism. It's pretty much the basic skepticism. I don't even want to say it's journalism so much as it is just ask questions, right? Just ask questions and be skeptical of everything that you hear, not even just for the sake of protecting your career, but for the sake of being inquisitive. Sometimes just wanting to know, sometimes just being curious can save your ass, like in a phenomenal way. And I think this is what happened with the Washington Post. I don't think it was a super, here's why I don't think it was super journalism. I think it was just being a basic fact checking. The thing that gave it away was a GoFundMe account. The thing that made Jamie Phillips look like someone who was working with Project Veritas was the fact that she had a public GoFundMe account with her name on it, and they were able to find it by a simple Google search. Right. And that was their first indicator that this woman, the GoFundMe account, by the way, was set up so she could raise money to help her get to New York to start a new job with a conservative outlet doing investigative journalism. So, it's pretty easy. You know what I don't consider journalism? It's hey everyone in the chat room. What I don't consider, well, I don't want to say that. I can't say that. Well, what I expect of journalists is to be able to find information that the average person can't find. So when you tell me you've done your research and you've done it through Google, I'm not knocking Google because I do research in Google all damn day, right? All day, every day. Everybody does. But to me, it's like going one step above and beyond. I like the fact that in this article with the Washington Post, a couple of red flags went off, and this probably would be where I would say, okay, they actually did some real research. They followed up on the woman's employment. Turns out she didn't work there. Followed up on followed up with her. What else did they follow up on? So it was her employment that gave a red flag. She said that she was going, when she was confronted about the GoFundMe account by the Washington Post, she said that, it was for a job at the Daily Caller. Well, Washington Post reached out to the Daily Caller and said, no, well, we never interviewed this woman. And so there's some pretty decent steps taking place. And I think those are steps that you should just take being a basic skeptic. But anyway, I digress. I apologize. I spent entirely too long criticizing the Washington Post for doing a good job. You can't, I mean, God damn, Ben, that was an unnecessary amount of time for them doing a good job, for me to be criticizing them for doing a good job. So anyway, getting back into the meat and the nuts and the bolts of the story. So the Washington Post exposed her, and they found her. Now this is where some good, there was some good investigation here. They I guess they had a suspicion that she was with Project Veritas. They never really explained this in the article, but they showed up outside of Project Veritas's offices, and they kind of did a stakeout. They being the Washington Post, and they saw Jamie Phillips show up and go into Project Veritas, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The rest is history. So Project Veritas attempted to hire a woman to claim that she had a sexual relationship with Roy Moore when she was 15. The woman is now 41, and that she got an abortion. And the crux of it was that the woman was recording the Washington Post reporters, and she kept pressing, trying to get them on video saying that, oh yeah, this is going to sink Roy Moore, et cetera, something to that effect. So, there's a couple of things here that are problematic. Besides the fact that Project Veritas and James O'Keefe, they're the scum of the earth. They are. Look what they did to Acorn. And Acorn was a valid organization that actually did nothing wrong. However, they were able to spin such a political fury in such a quick time span that they were able to bring down Acorn. Okay. And this is, before I get to the problems with this is one last thing that I want to say. There were a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters who started sharing work by James O'Keefe during the primaries and during the general election, because O'Keefe had some information, allegedly had information on Hillary Clinton. I forgot the particular details, but what I do remember in great detail was the fact that so many people were upset with me because I insisted that if you share something from James O'Keefe, then you're basically wallowing in the worst of the worst, in the mud, the muck. Right? James O'Keefe has zero integrity. There is nothing that he has produced that represents the goodwill, the best interest of Americans, nothing in terms of journalistic integrity. There's nothing there but a conservative agenda to destroy anything progressive. That's the other thing. It's like, how do you share links from people whose end goal is to destroy what you're working on? And I guess I'm still passionate about that because I didn't mean to yell in the microphone over that, but I can never forget people just losing their minds. They're losing their minds because I'm like, James O'Keefe has no journalistic integrity whatsoever. James O'Keefe is a tool. James O'Keefe is a slime ball. He's a scum of the earth. Look at how he works. Look at what he does. And most of all, James O'Keefe has a conservative agenda that is dead set on destroying everything that you want to accomplish as a progressive. So I don't care if he's sharing something on Hillary Clinton or not. How the hell do you promote something that from somebody whose entire goal in life is to destroy everything that you're fighting for? This is the best water I've had ever. This water I'm drinking. I don't know how you do it, but anyway, here are the problems with what O'Keefe was doing. I think he was going for a 2-for-1. I think it was going for undermining not just the Washington Post, because this is ultimately not about the Washington Post. It would have been the New York Times. He would have done it with the New York Times. It's actually threefold. It was a threefer. Number one, he wanted to support Roy Moore. As this election comes, this is why there's such a quick turnaround. The election is December 12th. His number one goal was to do something that would help Roy Moore bounce back in the polls. And what better could he have done than to undermine the journalists who actually broke the original story? That's number one. Number two, this is an attempt to undermine the press, the media. Love them, like them, hate them. And on a lot of days I hate them, but it is a sea of, there is a mixture, there's a hodgepodge of good and bad that comes out of our media. And I think the most significant thing that can come out of this era is a citizenry that is critical, that not just to criticize, but thinks critically with regard to our media. And for the pros and the cons, the good and the bad, we have learned to question everything. And so while our media is highly problematic, we're adult enough to be able, and we're becoming even more mature as an electorate, as a body politic rather, we're mature enough to look at them through the eyes of critical analysis and make decisions for ourselves. That's our goal. But what James O'Keefe's goal was today, and what conservatism goal is in general with regard to the media, is to make only conservative media, not only to make conservative media the only thing that you trust, but to make conservative media the baseline, so that anyone who does not forward conservative talking points, they're essentially not the, actually, I could say that better. Let me reel that back in. They want to make it so that conservative talking points are the baseline for your afternoon 6 o'clock live at 5 news broadcast. And so that while you're thinking in your mind that you're receiving something that is unbiased and just the facts, that's what they want to replace. They want to replace just the facts with just conservatism, with just conservative talking points, just a right-leaning perspective. And this is not hyperbole. This is the Sinclair Group. Sinclair Group has bought up hundreds of local stations across the country, and they literally put on someone who, I forgot the name of the guy, but he's actually a former staffer for Donald Trump. Right? Boris something. It'll come to me before we're done with the show. But they literally put him on at your 6 o'clock news, ABC affiliate, NBC affiliate. They put this guy on as simply giving the facts, and every word that comes out of his mouth is a conservative talking point. They don't just want you to only trust conservative media. They want to replace the baseline, so that there's another way I could say that is more succinct, but I think you're getting the point. The point is this: where there's no longer two sides to the argument. We're well past that phenomenon. We're well past that. They want the facts to be replaced. This is what Texas is doing with some school books. They want to replace the history, and so that it has a right-leaning perspective. The problem is that for a long time, we've reveled as progressives and liberals and people who are not Republicans generally, we reveled in the fact that truth has a liberal bias. Remember that saying, that slogan, truth has a liberal bias? Well, Republicans came in and said, shit, let's replace the truth with conservatism. And this is a part of what James O'Keefe is doing. He's just, I mean, I want you to understand, in 1 year alone, he raised $4.8 million to do this. And he's nothing more than a high-profile troll, a well-paid high-profile troll. I mean, this is just one dude who dressed up like a freaking pimp, and he's being rewarded hand over foot to do this. Republicans, in a minute we'll talk about the Koch brothers deal with Time Warner, well, not Time Warner, but Time Inc. But conservatives are putting billions of dollars into replacing the truth with conservative talking points, so that anything that you hear that deviates from Republican talking points is not even a matter of conservatism versus progressivism and liberalism. It becomes a matter of what you're saying is factually untrue, because now at 6 o'clock and live at 5, we heard these talking points from the unbiased media. Little known fact, their unbiased media is now owned by a conservative machine. Sinclair, Meredith. I like the way Linda put it in the chat room. They're moving the Overton window even further right, create a new norm like 45. And that's essentially what it is. That's the bottom line. It's like the entire range of discourse will no longer be, they are desperate. This, I have to finish talking about James O'Keefe, but I can't really talk about him without getting into the main thing that I wanted to talk about. Conservatives have one goal, man. Conservatives have one goal, and that is to completely leave the American citizen and the American consumer. More important than citizenry is your consumerism. That's the word. Yeah, is your consumerism. They want to leave the American consumer completely vulnerable to the forces of not just capitalism, but monopolistic capitalism. They don't want any intervention from the government. They don't want any intervention from the media. They don't want any investigative journalism that could expose anything and cause a political backlash. They not only want the government out the way, but they want the media out the way, and they want any dissent from the people out of the way. They're playing for keeps here, ladies and gentlemen, and non-gender conforming people. They are playing for keeps. They are not just trying to undo. I always used to say that they're trying to undo the New Deal. That's true. That's very true. And that's their laser-like focus. But they're trying to make sure that none of the elements are in place ever again to bring back a New Deal. That's what they want. They not only want to undo the New Deal, but they want to destroy any of the elements that made it necessary for the government to be accountable to the people. Media, protest. They want to get rid of and government intervention, I mean, obviously. All right, so I went off on that tangent, and we're going to come back to that. But here's the last thing that's very problematic with this, with James O'Keefe's quote-unquote reporting. I wouldn't even say that, like his trolling. Is that ultimately there is going to be a resistance to believing women when it comes to sexual allegations. And if they could create the scenario, if they just put one person into the mix that can muddy the waters and say that that person was lying, that person's not believable, or that person got this senator, God forbid, that person took down an entire senator, then they would create the conditions where nobody is going to be discussing or nobody is going to be willing to believe women at face value. So it was like a threefer. It was there. It was there to attack, to help Roy Moore. And it's very one of the questions that the Washington Post reporter who basically did his own sting operation on James O'Keefe. One of the questions that James O'Keefe refused to answer was whether or not he was working for Roy Moore or the Republican Party or the local Republican Party or anyone affiliated with a conservative movement that supports Roy Moore. And he refused to answer that. So ultimately, yes, he was out there because he refused to answer that. I'm going to conclude, my personal conclusion is that he was out there working for Roy Moore. 2, he's out there to undermine the press in general, not to be a skeptic like Mike Cernovich or whatever the hell his name is, say, James O'Keefe showed that he was trying to hold the press accountable. This was not an attempt to hold the press accountable. This was an attempt to destroy the press or to destroy anyone in the press that would dare challenge conservatism. So 1, he was there to help Roy Moore. 2, he was there to undermine the media, the press. And then number 3, it's definitely there to undermine the women who are the women brave enough to come out, the women who are willing to risk it all to come out here and tell their story of sexual assault. And that's where we are.